Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a really controversial theory, one that claims to solve one of the biggest mysteries in all of medicine. And that mystery all comes down to one single question, a question that scientists have been wrestling with for, well, over a century now. This theory, from a guy named Wilhelm Reich, claims to have the answer. Okay, so the theory starts by painting this picture of a cancer cell as a wild cell. You know, a healthy cell, it plays by the rules, it stays put, it works with its neighbors. But a cancer cell, it's a total agent of chaos. It invades, it destroys, it goes wherever it wants. And for the longest time, nobody could figure out how a perfectly normal cell just goes rogue like that. Well, according to Reich, the reason we miss the origin story is because we were looking at it all wrong. He argued that science was using the wrong tools. Think about it. They were studying dead tissue, preserved in formalin, under pretty low magnification. He said it's like showing up to a crime scene after everything's been cleaned up. You see the aftermath, but you have absolutely no idea how it all went down. So what did he do? He changed the whole method. He started looking at living samples from patients under super high magnification, and what he claimed to see was just extraordinary. A whole bizarre world of tiny living things that just weren't there in healthy people. We're talking amoeba-like cells, little critters with tails, and these countless tiny spear-shaped particles he'd eventually call T bacilli. And here is the absolute kicker. His big claim was that these things weren't invaders from the outside, not bacteria or a virus. No, he said they were spontaneously being created from within the body, literally being born out of the patient's own collapsing, decaying tissue. This single observation is what led to his whole theory of cancer biogenesis. See, he wasn't saying a cancer cell is just a mutated version of a normal cell. He was saying it's something else entirely, a totally new, primitive creature that basically self-assembles out of decaying biological material, kind of like how you see amoebas just pop up in stagnant pond water. And he laid out a very specific 7-stage process for how this monster is born. First, healthy tissue breaks down into these tiny energy vesicles he called bions. Then, these little bions start to clump together. A membrane forms around the clump. Inside, they all fuse together into this single fluid. And then, it starts to change. It grows a tail, it starts to move on its own, and finally it matures into that fully fledged, amoeba-like cancer cell, ready to invade. Okay, but that leads to a huge question, right? Why? Why would our own body's tissue just start collapsing in the first place? And this is where the theory zooms out from just the cell to the state of the entire person. His answer starts with this idea he called cellular suffocation. The theory goes that chronic stress, we're talking emotional and physical, causes the whole body to kind of contract. This contraction chokes off what he called life energy to certain organs. And when that happens, the cells in those organs literally start to suffocate. So picture this. The main part of the cell is dying. It's suffocating. But the nucleus, which is still jam-packed with energy, isn't going down without a fight. It basically rebels. It has what Reich called a cellular anxiety attack, a final, chaotic, desperate burst of energy to try and survive. And this is so important to the theory. That rapid cell division we always hear about with cancer, he's saying that's not the cause of the disease. It's a symptom. It's the result of that dying cell's nucleus freaking out and trying to break free. And in that chaotic explosion, the cell literally shatters into the very same bions that then go on to form a new cancer cell. It's a cycle. Okay, but this whole process of decay brings us back to those mysterious little particles we mentioned earlier, the ones he saw under the microscope. And this is where the story takes a really startling turn. He called them T bacilli, or even more dramatically, the particle of death. He claimed these things are formed anytime protein decays. And get this, he said he proved it. He was able to give healthy mice cancer just by injecting them with these particles. Now, according to Reich, we all have these T bacilli in our bodies. So what's the difference? He said that in a healthy person, the body's life energy is strong enough to just zap them, neutralize them instantly. But in someone who's already weakened, that energy is low, and the T bacilli can just multiply like crazy until they become toxic. So that seems like the smoking gun, doesn't it? If you can inject these T bacilli into a healthy mouse and give it cancer, then the T bacilli must be the direct cause. They're the carcinogen. Case closed, right? Wrong. And this is probably the most radical, most shocking claim in the entire theory. Reich said no. The T bacilli are not what creates the cancer cell. So if it's not the T bacilli, then what is it? He concluded that the cancer cell is not the disease. It's the body's defense mechanism, a twisted, flawed, self-destructive attempt to fight the real enemy, that massive invasion of T bacilli. It's literally a civil war inside the body. The T bacilli are this invading army of death particles swarming into weakened tissue. So the body panics. It scrambles to create its own army of life particles, the bions, to fight back. But the defense is raised so hastily, it's so chaotic, that our own army goes rogue. It clumps together, it stops listening to orders, and it becomes the cancer cell. So if you follow that logic all the way through, it means the patient doesn't actually die from the cancer cell itself. They die from being poisoned. When that defense force, the cancer cell, is finally destroyed, it collapses and releases a catastrophic second wave of T bacilli into the system. It's a total system failure, basically a form of sepsis. Okay, so this whole idea also completely flips the script on how we think about hereditary cancer. You know the conventional idea, you inherit a defective cancer gene from your parents. Well, this theory says that's not it at all. It says what we call hereditary cancer is actually an infection that's passed from a mother to her child while it's still in the womb. So think about what's being passed on. It's not a blueprint for a disease, not a faulty gene. It's a biological state. The baby is born already having been infected with T bacilli from the mother's blood, and its own energy system is weakened from the very start. That doesn't guarantee cancer, but it creates a powerful predisposition to it for the rest of that person's life. And that really brings us to the core of this whole theory. If a cancer cell isn't the enemy, but a deeply flawed defense mechanism, what does that change about how we look at disease itself? It asks us to see it not just as a bug or an invader, but as a complex, maybe even tragic story our own bodies are telling.